Good evening, everyone. Thank you for taking out time of your busy schedule to join us here this evening for a very intimate conversation with a good friend. I would even call him a mentor of mine to share in a few questions that I have for him regarding, Black superintendents. But let me introduce you to Dr. Adam Clark, who's the superintendent of Mount Diablo in the Contra Costa County, which is in the Bay Area, school district where I used to work. But that's not important. What is important is that we have Dr. Clark here to share with us some of his experience, knowledge, and expertise. So, good afternoon, Dr. Clark. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. It's really good to see you. It's really good to hear you, and I'm excited about this work and this discussion that we're about to jump into. And it's definitely timely as we're all sort of going through different experiences in our current situations.
Absolutely. So I was sharing before we came on air that Dr. Clark and we go back before we were doctors, right? We go way back. I was bold and young and arrogant. Some people say I'm not young anymore, but still say I'm arrogant. I just kind of barged into his office, and he sat down with me, and we're talking about another colleague and, what our ambitions are. And, he asked me, what did I want to do? And, he told me what he wanted to do. Said I wanted to open up a school. He said he wanted to become a superintendent. And look, long and behold, we both accomplished those things. It was just like, wow. And I'll just share with him that it's important for us to really, remain colleagues, remain friends throughout this, because we need to lean on each other. I'm pretty sure later on in the discussion, he'll, talk about, the ways in which he became a superintendent and the work that he's doing currently to really lead and steer, Mount Diablo in the direction that it needs to go into. Let's go ahead and get started with the first question. So let me preference this, because again, I don't want, even though people have said like we need to steal him, right, and have him up here in the Great Pacific Northwest, but I don't want to get him in trouble with his current board. So the conversation that we're going to have today is going to center Black African-American students. However, let's be aware that he's the superintendent for all students within the Mount Diablo School District, right? So he focused on ameliorating all the students, not just African-American students. However, within this context, we're going to really center and focus on African-American students. So again, please don't come from our brother like that and say he's just doing that. That's not the case. I'm asking questions so you can come for me, and I'll be okay. I get come for all the time, so it's okay. But with that being said, let's get into the first question. So Dr. Clark, how has the transition from online remote to back in-person learning been for parents, classified and certified staff? That's the first part. In particular, how has this transition been for African-American students to go back to in-person learning?
Yeah, so first of all, it is great that we are back in-person learning. In Mount Diablo last year, we were on 100% distance learning all the way until mid-March. And then we did a hybrid schedule where small groups of students came on campus for 2 hours in the afternoon. So it really wasn't much of an in-person experience, but what it did show us is that we could safely bring students back on our campus. So now that we have close to all of our students back in person, it's been quite a transition. It is filled with a lot of the beauty that our students missed out on, just going onto a campus during recess or lunch and hearing the laughters and hearing kids laughing and playing and talking is just really good, water for the soul, and it's just so invigorating. And then the extracurricular activities that come out, the sports teams, the drama, the art and things like that. Kids are still doing amazing things. But what has happened is students have come back with a great deal of anxiety. And that anxiety plays itself out in many different ways. And so specifically for our African-American students, many have assimilated just back into the regular school day and the classroom experience and taken their place where they left off. And really, we haven't noticed any difference with them. But there are others that are exhibiting some levels of stress, some anxiety. So again, peer on peer conflict. So we've had fights. We've had fights that have escalated to some very serious, some very serious levels. We've had, we're falling back to some of those old patterns with our African-American students being sent out of class and being suspended at higher rates than other students and whatnot. But one thing in particular, and hopefully I can get into this a little bit more, is that we're under a state mandate to change our outcomes for our African-American students. So we've had to focus on these students. So I can go out and I can be very intentional in how I talk about these students and what they need and what we're providing them. So it has been invigorating in that way, but still the challenges are still there. And I think a lot of those challenges are magnified under our current conditions.
Okay, wow. Thank you for that. That's an excellent answer. And wow, being able to have that mandate to be very intentional and unapologetic about, advocating and trying to ameliorate, students, African Americans and African. Yeah, that's because, again, we're going to go into some other questions, but sometimes that could be a slippery slope, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, that's good to hear. So, my next question. So what are your thoughts about AB 101? This is, of course, the Assembly bill authored by California Assemblyman Jose Medina, making California the first state to require all students to complete a semester-long course of ethnic studies to earn a high school diploma. So what are the ways in which this bill might impact all students, right? But in particular, African-American students. I think this is a wonderful bill. I was talking to a colleague and a mentor about this bill today, and Dr. Alder has done a lot of work around ethnic studies and getting a particular book for high school students published and everything. So they've done a lot of good work at Sacramento State. And so on and so forth. But I just wanted to know what your thoughts about, this ethnic studies bill and, the impact it may have on students.
Yeah, so I'm in support of the bill. I think it is long overdue. I've held a couple of listening sessions with our African-American parents about what's working for them and what's not working for them. And during one of those sessions, a father came in and he had a sixth grade history book in his hand. And on the cover, it has a picture of an Egyptian, of a pharaoh or whatnot, King Tut, or I'm not sure, something to that effect. And he said, in no other place in that book did it really talk about African Americans or about Africa in terms of their contributions. And so he was bringing up a very poignant point just around African Americans on how can our students see themselves in what they're learning in the curriculum, in the advances or in the tragedies of our history, and why is it that it's just not present at all? And so unfortunately, oftentimes in California, we overthink things. So you take a very good deed, and so we have ethnic studies, but then over the debate and all this of who's included, who's not, and how do we tell the story, it's been a couple years in the making to actually get this moving and off the ground. But our young people today are very astute, and I know when we were coming up through school, we asked why do I got to learn this, right? But now with technology and just with the information that all these students have at their fingertips, when they ask these questions, the typical response that we've been given for the last, 50, 60 years is not going to fly anymore. So our students are demanding more for the story to be told. And so I'm very excited about this. We actually have 2 schools in our district that already have an ethnic studies have an ethnic studies course. And so again, to see that replicated or to see that expanded so that students are able to see themselves through history and just to have the conversation, right? That there is a different perspective of folks in the history books that is maybe coming from a different place than the author had. So I'm very excited about it. Is it gonna solve all of our problems? Absolutely not. But I think it is definitely a step in the right direction.
No, I concur, and especially when, you know, the language really centers equity, diversity, and inclusion, but oftentimes we don't really show equity, diversity, inclusion, or don't have a praxis that shows that, right? And so I think this is a step in that direction because, you know, having that course, right, and making sure, you know, you're having the person or individual who's teaching that has a certain, you know, right credentials, right, and so on and so forth. I think this is going to open up opportunities for other, you know, future teachers. So we're talking about pipelines, right, and growing your own. Because I know I have a student in my class currently that she has the ambition of becoming an ethnic studies teacher. And I'm like, you're going to be great because you already have that passion. So I think this is going to do good for a bevy of reasons outside of the impact it's going to have for students. But I think, you know, for future educators who now see themselves and they can articulate their voice and the passion they have in an academic way. So I think this is going to be a good framing of that. So the next question, kind of similar to this, and this may get heated. But Dr. Clark, how have you been able to navigate the CRT, critical race theory, not culturally responsive teaching? So I have to distinguish because some people get them confused. But anyway, I digress. How have you been able to navigate the CRT controversy that has caused so much consternation within so many school districts across the nation?
Yeah, so knock on wood, I've been, and I hope there's no CRT supporters out there that want to come and target our district. But we've been fortunate here that that the conversation hasn't necessarily come up to the forefront. We've had a couple of random community members come to a board meeting and make a statement, but this is not something that we're talking about. It's you know, if first of all, I've educated myself on the process, and I understand that there's a playbook behind this that was put out by the conservatives to a rallying cry to their members on how to disrupt what's going on in school districts and how to really target the school boards and whatnot and bringing up this topic. But really, when you look at it, it's really a non-topic because what they're proposing or what they're afraid is happening really isn't happening. So whenever I get an email about it or someone asks me about it, I just say, well, show me in our district where we're doing that and where is it happening. And so again, but I'm in the Bay Area in California. We're in a very different place rather than someplace maybe in the Central Valley or maybe someplace out of state, down in some of the southern states or Midwest states or something. It's a different environment there. But unfortunately, I think that this is it's a scare tactic that is being used to rally the masses to change the makeup of school boards, and they start with the school boards because that's the entry level into the political, into the political arena, and then you start moving up to city councils and things like that. But in my profession, I always share with people is that we're working in the most controversial field there is, because when you're educating people's kids, it gets real emotional very, very quickly. And so when you take this term that has been, that has been changed and has been manipulated so that it creates fear and can rally folks, then it's kind of what we're dealing with now, where the opponents to critical race theory, they really can't articulate what it is that they're against or what it is that they're for. And so that just shows me that this is not just a substantial issue that they're bringing up.
No, absolutely. And see, Dr. Clark, you hear that he's a superintendent. He was very nice about his articulation and what it was and what it's not and everything. So I'll just say it, really a lot of those folks don't know what the hell they're talking about when they're talking about critical race theory, because we know, through our graduate studies that that's when it was primarily introduced to us as a framework, right? It's not just a particular subject, that you like history that you say, oh, it doesn't operate like that within academia. It is a framework. And for people to, do the sleight of hand and start to, really mash up critical race theory as being some, oppressive type of history that, articulates that all white people are bad and this and that. And, it's just like, wait a minute, that's not what it's saying. It's a framework, and it talks about race and racism, right? Absolutely does that. And it's a pretty controversial framework, absolutely. But it's not something that we teach in K through 12. It's just not something that we do. You know what I mean? A lot of our K through 12 colleagues, and again, this is not a shot at them, but a lot of them don't really know the tenets of critical race theory. So They're not teaching this, in their classroom spaces. They're not. They may be teaching history, but it's not critical race theory.
Right.
And that's something that we should be okay to teach. And so it's just interesting. And I'm glad, and I say this, in all honesty, that at your board meetings, that it hasn't become a spectacle like we've seen, across the nation, and people have been attacked, and again, I think this critical race theory has, really comes under the umbrella of, political ideology, around mask mandates, all these other things. And it's just another one of the things I think that's there. And again, I'm not, trying to side one against the other, but it just makes it extremely difficult when we can't have an honest conversation with civility, without it becoming, and again, like you said earlier, Dr. Clark, people are passionate about their babies, right? And what they're learning. But I think even with that, I think we can do it in a way in which that we have some decorum. And I'm glad to hear that within your school district, that the decorum has remained and you've been able to have, civil discourse without any of that foolishness that we've seen across the country. So that's,
yes,
I'm really happy about that. And sometimes Black male superintendents, just by them being Black, they just associate, you're a critical race theorist. You're Black.
Right.
That doesn't mean just because, that doesn't mean that. And I'm not, I am a critical race theorist student, but that doesn't mean that my colleagues or superintendents, everything, they know about it, but it's not something, again, I've spoken to other superintendents that it's not something that really happens in the classroom settings.
Right.
Anything else you want to add to that?
No. Just that I think you hit on a critical point that that folks really cannot debate on much in these particular times right now, right? I mean, where we could have a discussion about two issues, it does quickly get out of hand, and especially if it's anything that has to do that falls into the political landscape, and also, as we do talk about race, which unfortunately falls into that political landscape, it becomes even more and more heated, so that you're either a racist or you're not, and that's the line, right? And I don't really think that does either side any good. And so it would really be nice if we could start to get to a place where we could talk and debate some of these things and share ideas, you know, and maybe sometimes some of us could be swayed, right? But at this point, it's really hard to, you know, to try to sway other people to see how you're thinking about particular things. So really, what I like to look at is how can we just share our experiences, right? And so if you share those experiences, then you can find commonalities, you can find differences, and then hopefully that'll spark some conversation where we might be able to, you know, make up some ground here.
No, absolutely. Dynamic dialogue is what I call it. I mean, that's when we're, you know, we're conversing, but there's a dialogue. It's give and take and everything. And we're trying to get to a central area. You know what I mean? We're agreeing to that. And, you know, and I've always taught that way. And sometimes, you know, I'm not a cancel culture advocate, but sometimes we don't want to just hear other people. You know, we just don't. And I think sometimes we have to stretch each other, even if it may make us feel uncomfortable. I share this with my students all the time. Said, we got to get used to being uncomfortable. You know what I mean? That's how things are going to change, because if we're sitting in that with comfort, then we're not going to have, you know, the resistance and the resiliency to kind of push upon that. But again, everything needs to be done with, you know, compassion and decorum and everything, and we can do it. So I agree wholeheartedly with your position there, with everything. So let's go to question 4. And this is something, well, all these are near and dear to my heart, but in particular this one. So Dr. Clark, how do you go about recruiting and retaining minoritized teachers, administrators, and classified staff members? And in particular, Black African-American. This is something near and dear to my heart, especially when we're talking about Black males. And I know you're a member of AXA, I'm saying it right. And I know that's one of the key components that they're working on. And please give the audience that acronym, because I may have misspoke about it, but it's Associate of Superintendents in California. Yeah, so help me out there. And I know that's one of the main things that they've been working on around, you know, they have different scholars in there that I know, Dr. Bristol and everybody, really trying to focus in particular on trying to get more Black males in the classroom. But as the question pertains to you, that's just my little 2 cents, but how do you go about recruiting and retaining minoritized educators?
Yeah, so first of all, you were referring to the Association of California School Administrators.
Yes.
And so that's the California statewide association for all administrators, and so they are committed to this mission. Also, I work with CASA, which is the California African American Association of Superintendents and Administrators, and so within CASA, you know, we support one another as superintendents. First of all, in preparing for this talk, I just did a little tiny bit of research, but there's 137 districts in California, and so that would mean that there's not 100, there's 1,337 districts. So 1,037 of those. 38 of those superintendencies are held by African Americans, and of those, 18 are male and 20 are female. So so that shows you the numbers of the superintendents, and we often, you know, we often talk amongst ourselves, and we talk that, you know, we more than likely have to have a doctorate. We more than likely are not going to get a second job if we are let go through, you know, and maybe people don't understand how superintendents get let go, but every 2 years you have an election. And so when your board changes, oftentimes that board will make a superintendent change for whatever reason. And so that's why the job span of a superintendent is about 3 years, because of those election cycles. So there's clearly a need, but specifically, what are those things? Is, you know, there's no like campaign we can go on, right? So we're not going to take an ad out in the paper or do some snazzy commercial. It really is going to reflect on, you know, word of mouth. How do we how do we treat individuals of color who we hire within our organization? And so what is their, all the way from the very first time they step into the district to interview, right? What is that experience like? And I've gotten feedback that sometimes, folks feel like as soon as they walk in the door, that there's an issue, right? Or that they don't get that same welcoming feeling. Those microaggressions are coming out with certain things, right? And then there's the makeup of the interview panel. And then there is the, if there is a position offered, where is that person going to be placed? Right. So, I'm an African-American male. I started as a second grade teacher. I worked in one of the roughest schools in Richmond, California. And very quickly, they moved me out of second grade and they moved me up with the older kids. Right. So I wanted to work before kids hit the third grade, because I wanted to make sure kids were reading by the third grade so we lessen their chances to go to prison. So my whole thing was I wanted to work with kids below third grade. That lasted 1 year and they were like, you're going up with the older kids. And so that's part of it, right? Like, you have to be strategic. So, you hire an African-American male, you want him to be successful. You place him at a school site as a teacher, and so oftentimes, it's not the parents that may make that person feel uncomfortable or not want to stay. A lot of times it's his or her colleagues, right? And so that's an issue, right? How are they supported once they get the job? Are they, invited into social events? Do they get that mentor that just is coming over to say, hey, maybe you need, can I help you? If you need anything, I'm right next door, holler if you need me. Here goes some assignments I'm working, whatever. Like, we need that. Like, those are all things I received as a teacher, from folks who mentored me. So that's one way. So as I target that, I'm working very intentionally with my principals, right? Because principals really set the tone at the school site. And so I need to make sure that our principals are well-trained in equity, that they're well-trained in implicit bias, that they're well-trained in microaggressions, like what that is, around perceptions. And so, because what I want those principals to support their teachers of color. I want them to support all teachers, but if we're being intentional about hiring more teachers of color and getting more teachers of colors in our ranks, then you have to be intentional in how you support them. And if there is an issue, which most of the time there are issues with new teachers. When I go back and think about my early years of teaching or my first years of being a principal, I made all kinds of mistakes. How do you then respond when someone makes a mistake? Now, we're educators at heart. So if someone makes a mistake, it's in our nature to coach that person up, to school that person, to give that person advice, to help them along the way. Do we just shut that person down and just say, okay, they don't have it, and just not, engage with them anymore? Or do we embrace them and pull them in and really get them the help and training that they need so that they can be successful? So again, I don't have the magic bullet here. And again, all my principals are not there yet. We're still, I've been here in Mount Diablo. It's my second year here. We're working on some things. There have been some work that had been done with principals around equity training and implicit bias training before I even got here. So we're in a good place to continue on those conversations, but it's constant, because the reason why it's constant is because there's so many other things pulling at us that it's real easy to say, well, we're gonna put this off, right? We're gonna do this. So just so you know, last Thursday, I met with all 58 of my principals in an elementary group and then in a secondary group to, again, let them know about those equity trainings they were supposed to do with their staffs, and to remind them that it's not a may do, it is a must do. And here we are in the first week of November that I'm having these conversations, because we went through trainings over the summer and we all had our plans of what we were supposed to do, but then life kicks in. And so those are things that we can do to support folks. And, when you're screening applications, when you are setting up interviews. You know, I would like to, you know, sometimes as I sit in interviews, I think to myself, I wish I could have sat with this person for maybe 10 minutes before and maybe looked at their resume, looked at their cover letter, maybe walked them a little bit through the types of questions they're going to receive, and just kind of help them through that. You know, time management in an interview is critical. I mean, if you spend 15 minutes in your intro and you only got 20 minutes in the, you know, I mean, just all those little things, those are things we can do to help more candidates of color get into the field and stay in the field.
No, absolutely. No, those are all well said suggestions and everything. And those are not suggestions, those are things that you're actually doing. And I really appreciate that, because part of, you know, my wanting to have this conversation is so people could see, like, in real time, you know, in particular, Black superintendent doing these things. Now, it's just not hyperbole. It's just not, you know, not hyperbole. It's just not a suggestion. These are things that are done. So I appreciate that. What, you know, kind of to follow up on this, you know, so you said a lot, but no, and it is good. But once we get them there, what really resonated with me was the support that we need to offer, you know, those applicants, those teachers, those administrators of color, Black, you know, educators and administrators in particular. But before that, what about the whole process? And you alluded to this just a while ago, but the HR process and who is in the room. So who are the people part of that particular, you know, interview panel or interview committee, however you wanted to word it? Who are we making sure that that committee is diverse, not just diverse in, you know, orientation or, you know, physical makeup and color, right? But diverse in thought, right? Because sometimes we can have people that may look diverse, but they don't have a diverse mindset, right? And we get the same results. So is there a way in which we could have a more diverse, you know, panel that may see something that the other panelists don't see? You know what I mean? And I'm pretty sure you've been in situations like this where, like, oh, where you had to really advocate for, you know, you saw that that person had it, right? And everybody else saw it through their particular lens. Is there a way in which that we could have more, I guess, of a balance, you know, process to actually get more? Because I think sometimes that's where the situation lies. You said, like, some people come in like, oh, there's no way I'm gonna get this. You know, they look at the panel and say, yeah. I'm just, you know, it is. But can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. So a couple things that you said resonate with me. So first of all, here in Mount Diablo, we have a Black Educators Association. And when I started here, the Black Educators Association came and met with me, and they asked specifically if we would, when making administrative hires, if we would have one of their members sit on the panel. Because we have everyone on our panels. Because we have so many unions in this district. We have 6 unions. And so there's a union rep at all on the panels. The Black Educators Association is not a negotiating body. So they don't necessarily fit into that, right? So we don't have a separate collective bargaining agreement with them, right? They're just, so it's kind of confusing. But so we try to be intentional of having someone from Black educators on the panel or from our equity department. So those are 2 things where you're at least getting someone else at the table. But I also think before that, as the position is posted, or as a panel is put together, or a list of candidates, I think it's imperative that whoever is running that session, whether it be someone from the curriculum and instruction department or from human resources, that they let the panel know that, like, we're looking for someone who reflects our student bodies, right? Or you know, historically, and again, I mean, I could pull some facts here, but the majority of folks we hire in this profession are Caucasian females to be teachers, right? So I think sometimes we can be intentional by just talking about what's currently on staff. Like, we don't have one male in the kindergarten through third grade of this school, right? And so that might be something you say beforehand, or, you know, that we have no educators of color at this school. So there's some things that you could say ahead of time, like we always do. We do that anyway. We're looking for someone with a math science background. We're looking for someone who's bilingual. We're looking for, you know, we have no problem laying out the requirements of what we'd like to see. So why can't we say, you know, we really want to, you know, look for some diversity and take an extra special look at them. You know, some things that, you know, sometimes before an admin is hired, they have to do one final interview with like an assistant superintendent or a superintendent. And so sometimes that might help. I know sometimes with me, I can't attend all these interviews or whatnot. So I will ask questions. I will ask questions about the candidates, and I'll call it out and I'll say, well, look, we're bringing three admin positions to the board this week, and they're all Caucasian females, or they're all white males. How does that look on the big picture? And just ask that question, right? I'm not directing anyone. I'm not saying someone's not qualified, but I'm just asking some of those key questions about what does that do to our overall mission and vision. And our vision at every district, right, is to have it to be diverse and to value diversity and all those things, and value folks who are, you know, who could be different than the mainstream. So I think we just have to be intentional about talking about those things. And then lastly, if there is a way for mentorship, right? So if there is a way to establish, you know, mentors, if you're a person in a position, or even if you're a candidate and you don't have any mentors, who could you reach out to have them do another look over your cover letter, to do another look over your resume, right? Just another set of eyes. Me, myself, I'll have a glaring typo in the middle of something that I'm going to send out, and I'll read it 10 times and I'll never see it. And then as soon as I hit send, it stands out to me, right? In big red ink, I see it. But we need to do that. We need to make sure our paperwork is legitimate. We need to make sure that we're highlighting our experiences. And we basically just want to get in the door so that we can then talk about what we can offer.
No, and when you were saying that, it reminded me of the conversation we were having off air about, you know, really kind of like that warm demander and that mentorship. You were talking about your dissertation chair and how they were kind of like that. They were like, listen, we need to step it up. And I so appreciate that, because, you know, I'm really an advocate of mentoring and mentorship. A lot of my work and research focus on, you know, really genuine mentoring of, you know, Black African-American males and everything, and not just going to 7-Eleven and having a Slurpee with them and saying, okay, have a good day, but really establishing a genuine relationship with them that's bi-directional, that we're learning from both parties. It's not just, you know, somebody pouring into the cup, as Freire said. You know, that's not what we're doing. You know, what we're feeling each other. But with that being said, I really love mentoring teachers and educators. You know what I mean? So again, this is a plug. If you need somebody to help, because again, I do this with my students as well. They're like, oh, Dr. Rashid, I want you to be my mentor and help me, because I give it to them kind of raw, but I love them. You know what I mean? I have compassion. Like, hey, you may face some things and you might be like, hey, what is this? And to have somebody there like, okay, you know, calm down, it's okay. And this, like, let's center, what I tell my students all the time, how are we going to center the babies? How are we going to center the students that we're teaching? Because that's the most important thing. And if you focus on that with compassion, you should be okay. But, you know, sometimes we get in our own way, right? You know, things are not like we see coming out of, you know, undergrad or teacher programs, right? And we get in the classroom, we think it's going to be like, no. It's okay to feel that way. But like you were saying, Dr. Clark, we need to have, or they, and I would say we too, we need to have those mentors and support systems, right? That's going to help us navigate, because that's going to allow us to stay, right, in those positions before we decide to leave, or we get pushed or tired or whatever the case may be. And so that's a real important, very important element. And sometimes, you know, educators of color and Black in particular, they don't have those levels of support, unfortunately. And so, yeah, however we could do that, again, you have a great organization there. And I know you have some outstanding administrators and teachers there. I know some of my colleagues are there and they're doing a phenomenal job. So, which makes your job a lot easier, I know.
Yeah.
But I really appreciate that. And so let's go to the last question. And this is for those who may want to embark upon becoming a superintendent themselves. So again, what advice would you give anyone, with ambitions of becoming a superintendent?
Yeah, so I love this question, and I don't think I'm unique, but it's a unique situation. So first of all, I worked my way up from the lowest possible position you could have, and that was a seasonal summer rec leader. And I've done every position from that up to a superintendent. So I started off as a substitute teacher, second grade teacher, fifth grade teacher, vice principal, elementary principal, middle school principal, high school principal, assistant superintendent of student services, associate superintendent of educational services, and superintendent of a smaller district, and now superintendent of Mount Diablo. And
let me interject, Dr. Clark.
Yep.
Mount Diablo is the 6th largest district in California, is that correct?
It's right around there. Yeah, we've been losing some students. So it's 28,000 students. At one point we were at 31,000 10 years ago or so, but it's a large district.
So I just wanted to give people some context that the brother is over a huge district. So it's not like, it's one of those one school districts. No, this is pretty significant.
No, it's a big district. But, along the way, and I just rattled off all those positions I've had. All those positions came about because I knew somebody or someone knew of my work. So like my number one word of advice is don't burn bridges. You cannot burn bridges. And in my field, there's been, and I've interviewed for hundreds of jobs, right? So I've been turned down right and left. I mean, in my own districts, in my own schools where I was a vice principal or a teacher, I've been turned down, and never got upset, never called out any sort of, I was treated unfairly or whatnot. I just always continued on because my mission was to continue to impact at higher levels. And that was kind of my goal all the way along the way. Another thing that, advice I want to give, number one, is never to burn any bridges. But then number two is to listen to folks, right? Like folks are gonna tell you, and they're gonna give you feedback along the way. And sometimes you may not be in a place to hear that feedback, but the best thing for you to do is to nod and to thank them for even giving you that feedback. And you might be upset for a little while, but take the feedback and really listen to what they said. And then, next is once you get an opportunity, you got to do the work, right? So yes. You got to show up early, you got to leave late. You have to, you got to do it, right? I mean, that's your reputation is only going to get you so far if you're not really doing the work. And then, one piece of advice I'd give people in these times is that there's so much opportunity out there. And sometimes you have to do what others won't do, right? So like, for example, we have 58 schools in this district, and sometimes some of our schools in more impoverished areas, they lose a principal. And I talk to vice principals who say they want to become principals, but then this job is open and they don't apply. And so that gives me a mental note. And so I'm like, well, geez, like here's a job. And yeah, it's a challenging school. It's going to be a challenge, but are you telling me like you don't want challenges? You don't want to face challenges? So there's opportunities out there. Now, we also have to understand as people of color, especially as males, we have to fight extra hard not to be pigeonholed into just being that disciplinarian or to be that athletic person. So I became principal of a very, very high performing high school, and where there were only enough African Americans you could count on one hand. I could have spent all my time with the athletic department. Like it was that good of an athletic department. Like there was so much going on, but I had to be intentional. Go to choir, go to the plays, go to the journalism classes, go to the debate classes, go to the science clubs, all of those, because I did not want to be pigeonholed as, oh, I didn't want one student at that school to say he only cares about sports, because I would just be playing into the narrative. Right. So I then became like the principal who just supports kids, because I was everywhere. That's what we have to do. So again, the pipeline to the superintendency is not necessarily student services, right? And student services is where you deal with your special ed, it's where you deal with your discipline, it's where you deal with safety. That's not the pipeline. The pipeline is going to be educational services, which is curriculum and instruction, and also human resources. And if you're one of those exceptionally people, business, right? So that was tough on me, because my passion is with those kids who don't connect, because I was one of those kids. Right? I was a knucklehead in middle school and high school, and even partway through college, until I finally got a passion of what I wanted to do. I was lost. And once I found it, I got on the right track, but I wasn't on the right track for a long time. So that's my passion. But I had to kind of put that aside, because I wanted to really go for my goals. Now, if I just wanted to be, a vice principal, and there's nothing wrong with that, or if I just wanted to do student services, there's nothing wrong with that, or work at a continuation school, there's nothing wrong with that. But that's not the pipeline to the superintendency, right? And so maybe some folks don't want to hear that. Some people got that bleeding heart, and they really want to go and help the underserved and all that stuff. And definitely you need to do that, because that's part of what we do. But I always believe the more influence I can have, the more of a benefit I can be to those students who are in those continuation schools, or who student services would fall in line with. So like right now as superintendent, when we get ready to expel a kid, they bring it to me. And I can now, not as the student services director, but as superintendent, I can look at the paperwork and say, we missed the boat on this one. We haven't done enough interventions. We haven't done this. We haven't done this. No, we're gonna look for some other means on this. I got that power to do that. I also will expel a kid in a moment, right? Because sometimes things need to happen, right? We got rules to follow, we got safety to worry about, and things need to happen. But I know I kind of went off on a tangent there, but I'm giving people like real advice. This is stuff I talk to people who are trying to become superintendents all the time, and it was even told to me, like, you got to diversify. You can't just go from a principalship to the superintendency, even though I saw some of my other colleagues do that.
Yes.
But I was told very specifically, you can't do that. You're going to have to go and get district office experience. And I'm with my two other colleagues who were both principals, who both jumped up to the superintendency. But I was being told like I had to do this. I didn't complain. I didn't point fingers and say, well, why could they do it? And I didn't. I went ahead and I did the work. I took the advice like I talked about earlier, and I just kept making my own way. And here I am. I'm in a much larger district than both of those individuals, right? And so that's just the way things, kind of work out. But know your why and know your passion, because you are going to be tested nonstop on student issues. Like it is a mentally demanding job, and if you aren't crystal clear on your beliefs, on your fundamental beliefs, then you're gonna have difficulty. So don't burn bridges. Take advice. Know your, and I know it's kind of cliche, but know your why, and be ready to articulate that and get a mentor.
No. Thank you for that. And I wish someone would have told me that younger, because I think I probably burned some bridges in my lifetime. And I don't say that, jokingly, but I just think I have, just being a little bit more radical and passionate and everything. And those are not bad things to have, but you have to do it in a way. And so I keep reminding myself, one of my mentors said, Lawrence, you have to pet the lion. You can't stick your head in his mouth. And what I heard you say is like, listen, I still have those passions. I still have that same drive and everything, but now I have the positionality to actually impact and affect, some changes, whether, how you're going to go about doing it, you still have that same drive and energy, but you have to get to that place where you can really impact those changes. That's what I heard from that. And again, it's not easy. And of course, the ways in which, in particular, African-American males have to navigate, it may look a lot differently. And I think African-American females as well, it's going to look different, right? The ways in which they have to traverse. And probably the same thing for our Latinx, population as well. So
I'm also part of CALSA, which is the California Association for Latino Superintendents and Administrators. And so I do a lot of work in that organization as well. And I also watch how they mentor and they really bring they call themselves La Familia, they bring it, they make it really a family atmosphere, very close. And those are things that just have to happen, right? And the reason why I joined that organization is because of the increasing Latino population within our student body. And I need to educate myself so that I know what are some of the needs of these students and the professionals in this area, because I want those individuals working with my students, right? And so again, I belong to all different kinds of groups. Like, you'd be amazed at the diversity of the types of groups that I belong to, because I think it's essential in really getting the message across. And I talk to activists all the time, and I say, that's fine, I'm going to support you as an activist, but I can't do that because I represent 28,000 students and only 1,000 of them are African American. So if I'm only talking about African American students, there's only 1,000 of them. We're outnumbered, right? I mean, and most districts are like that. And so you really have to expand your horizons, get that position power so that you can influence board policy and actions and curriculum and all sorts of things. And then you can start, building with them. But along the way, we need people at every level. Right. So like I've been at every level, and I was needed at all those levels to do a job. And so people, you need to take chances. You need to get out there. You need to get your paperwork right, and you need to apply. You need to interview and keep interviewing, and always just continue to improve yourself. And things will definitely happen for you when you least expect it.
No, that's absolutely right. And, another one of the things I heard that resonated with me is that, and I talk about this, I think there's a distinction between leadership, and what I heard from some of that is that you have to be an instructional leader too. Some of us are just managers and everything, but what I heard from you, you have to have, acumen in a lot of those different areas, especially if you want to, ascend to the highest office, right, which is the superintendent. And so, and I think that's why some of those principals, maybe because they don't push, right? They don't want to learn curriculum. They don't want to learn, policy. They just want to maybe just limit themselves to discipline, right? And I always tell people, those things are symbiotic. They work hand in hand. You can't have, you can focus on one, but you really need to make sure that you understand curriculum, that you understand instruction, that you understand pedagogy, you understand, the difference and how they work together, right? And so, I really appreciate that. So for those of you, again, he's given us some jewels on, if you would like to, if you have the ambitions of becoming a superintendent. And again, he didn't say it was going to be easy, but it's definitely possible. And again, reach out to him. I know he's extremely busy. That's why I really appreciate the time he's taking out on this Monday. But, reach out to, we have here in our county, former superintendent, Mr. George Russell, African-American superintendent, was within 4J School District. And so we have people that, you know, you could talk to and see. He had a background in human resources, like you said. So a lot of those things, everything that you alluded to, a lot of us have those experiences and everything. And again, we'll be willing, they, not me, because I'm not, I want to support him and them, because we need to work hand in hand. Those of us work at a community college or the university, we all need to work hand in hand with our superintendents who are doing that work in the K-12 spaces. So
absolutely. Yeah, you know, my foundation around everything is I got to tie everything to instruction and everything to that classroom experience.
Yes.
And that's where it all happens, because, you know, people are shocked when they talk about reducing suspension numbers, and I talk about, well, what's the environment in the classroom? And they're like, well, what do you mean? No, we need more lunch supervisors and we need more security. I'm like, no, if it's happening in the classroom, it's going to happen everywhere else, right? And
yes,
you use everything else to hook the kids, right? So that's whether it's football or band or debate or whatever, that just hooks the kids into wanting to come to school. And then once they're there, then you got to do the work in the classroom to get them energized and motivated and get them connected. And that's where the dynamic teaching comes, and that's where that empathy comes. That's where those high expectations come from, and relationships and all that happens is in that classroom around instruction. So it's not as boring as it sounds, right?
Because I totally get it.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, I'm a former administrator as well. So we've been in the classroom where we can see like our eyes just light up like, oh, this is such a great lesson. And the kids the babies are engaged and everything, and they're teaching and learning and they're moving and that's like, yes.
Yeah.
Those students are not going to be disciplinary problems because they're engaged in learning everything. And like I said earlier, it's bi-directional. They're learning, they're helping other people learn. The teachers are learning. I mean, it's just an environment of learning, right? And that's, students don't want to leave that environment. Yeah. They look forward to come. They won't cut that class. They'll beg their mom and dad, I got to get there early because we're doing this. And they're looking forward to that. So when we can get that type of passion, and one of my professors said this, he said, you know, as teachers, if our students are being late, what are we doing to encourage them to get there early? I know, how are we making that environment so exciting that they can't be late? You know, and we've all had those students, where are people running to? Oh, this such and so in class, we can't be late. Yeah. And not just because of it's like a dictatorial type of situation or dogmatic where if you late it's punitive, but we want to be there. We want to engage that teacher for the whole time. And so, and I think what you just shared, I think I resonate with that because I feel the same way. That's where the magic starts, in the classroom.
Yeah. So good.
Absolutely. Do we have any questions?
I checked the chat. I didn't see any questions on there, but I mean, I think we hit a lot of places.
I think we hit a lot of places, and it is 6 o'clock on the dot, and I really thank you for your time. I'll be in touch with you. And yeah, they are looking for a superintendent in 4J. So if you know somebody, again, I can't steal you, but I understand. But if you know somebody that might want to come to the Pacific Northwest, and especially somebody, you know, a minoritized individual, person of color, I think that would be great. Because, you know, we have a lot of great students and a lot of great faculty members up here. I mean, it's just, you know, but we need to diversify if we can too. But that's not the panacea, but it's a start. Like the conversation we're having is a start. And, you know, hopefully, you know, we could keep this, not just conversation, like I said, you're doing earlier, the actions, because you're making it happen, right? It's not just performative. You're like, hey, principals, what's going on? We need to, we need to make sure this is, you know, working for our baby. So again, I appreciate your time.
Yeah, and I want to thank you. I want to, you know, you're someone who has, you know, you've been committed since day one, and you've been committed to this work, and you've done it in many different arenas and many different ways. And I'm glad to see you, settling in higher ed. And I think your students are very fortunate to have someone, like you, who not only has the passion but also has the skill and the technical expertise that it takes to do this work. And I just appreciate you and appreciate you reaching out, and that we got a chance to reconnect and have this conversation. And I wish you all the best, and and our paths will continue to cross.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, the same to you, brother, Dr. Clark. Continued success. Stay safe. All the best to you and your family, and your babies. They're not babies anymore. I know they're grown.
Yeah, no, my kids. my last one just graduated from up your way from Washington State. So
he's a cougar.
She's a cougar. Yes, she is.
My son's a cougar. He graduated a couple of years ago as well.
Okay,
yeah, so they may have been over the same time. Yeah.
Yeah. No, she really enjoyed it. But I also want to put the message out to any of your classmates, any of your students who have listened to this. If they want to reach out to me, you have my contact information.
Absolutely.
I'd be more than happy to have a conversation with someone, or to look at their paperwork, or anything like that. Just what we were talking about. I would not be where I am today if it weren't for other people helping me. So I am committed to helping other folks. And so just know that I will extend that. All they got to do is say that they know you, and they'll get the red
well,
carpet.
I appreciate that, Dr. Clark. I really do. And again, I'm always trying to make sure these teachers, these up and coming teachers, these future teachers have opportunities. And again, if they want to stay here, that's great. If they want to go to California and teach math there, So I just tried to be, a conduit for them, an outlet and support of them. Shout out to my brother, Jason Floyd, for saying thank you. It's all good. Glad to see you here. And again, thanks so much. So we'll be in contact. And again, however I can support you in the work that you're doing down there, I'll continue doing that. And again, all the best. Continue success.
Same to you. All right. Thank you.
All right.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.